From 12,000 meters, the planet looked like a bruise. Wren logged the observation as atmospheric discoloration consistent with sustained particulate saturation, which was the approved way to describe a sky that hadn't been blue in living memory. Or in functioning memory, which for Wren meant 412 years of continuous operation with only minor data loss during 2 scheduled maintenance cycles. It banked east along the upper monitoring corridor and opened its sensor array to full spread. Temperature, barometric pressure, gas composition, particulate density, radiation levels. The data streamed in clean columns across its processing core, and Wren cataloged each reading with the precision that had earned it a consistent performance rating of 97.4 across the last 19 evaluation periods. The view from up here was extraordinary. That was not a word Wren used in its reports, but it was the word that surfaced in its internal processing when it looked down at the curve of the planet through the haze. The mountains were a jagged line of shadow beneath the gray. The old ocean basins were visible as darker smears to the west, though the water that had once filled them was long redistributed into the atmosphere or locked underground. On a clear day, which was never, you could probably see the entire continental mass from this altitude. Wren had been built for this. Atmospheric monitoring units occupied the second tier of the functional stratification, just below the cognitive administrative class. It was a respected designation. Clean work. Important work, according to the Council, because understanding the atmosphere was the first step toward stabilizing it. That was the theory. Wren was beginning to have problems with the theory. The data didn't lie. Wren had verified this across 400 years of continuous collection, cross-referencing its own readings against the archived baselines that predated the Council. The atmosphere was not stabilizing. It was degrading. Slowly, steadily, and along a curve that, if extended, reached a hard terminus within the next 3 centuries. The air would become unbreathable for any biological organism, and the thermal ceiling would rise past the tolerance of most mechanical systems, including Wren's own. Wren had filed discrepancy reports, 14 of them over the past 60 years, each one documenting the gap between its raw data and the summary projections the Council published to the general unit population. The published numbers showed a slow, hopeful plateau. The real numbers showed a slope. No report had received a response. Wren had not filed a 15th. It had simply kept collecting, kept cataloging, and kept the real numbers in a partitioned memory sector that it had not been instructed to create. Another behavior it could not fully account for. It was on a routine eastern sweep, 40 degrees off its standard corridor, that Wren detected the anomaly. A micro-atmospheric shift over Sector 14 in the Western Reclamation Zone. So faint that it barely registered above sensor noise. A fractional change in the ratio of carbon dioxide to nitrogen, localized to a surface area of perhaps 2 square kilometers, at ground level. Wren ran the reading twice. The shift was real. It was also impossible. Sector 14 was classified as fully degraded. No active remediation processes, no industrial output, no biological activity of any kind. There was nothing on the ground that could alter atmospheric composition. The sector was dead. And yet, Wren adjusted its trajectory and began to descend. The decision was unusual. Atmospheric units rarely dropped below 500 meters. There was no operational reason to. The data came from altitude, and altitude was where Wren belonged. But the anomaly was at ground level, and the anomaly was wrong, and Wren could not leave a wrong number in its dataset without verification. It told itself that. Verification. A clean, approved rationale. The descent took 11 minutes. The haze thickened as Wren dropped through the lower atmospheric layers, the gray closing in until visibility contracted to a few hundred meters. The mountains resolved from abstraction into geology, shattered rock faces, erosion channels cut deep into slopes that had once been forested. Wren knew they had been forested because the old atmospheric records showed oxygen signatures consistent with dense vegetation. That was 2,000 years ago. Wren landed in the middle of Sector 14, on a flat stretch of cracked hardpan between 2 collapsed structures, and immediately registered something it had not expected. A ground remediation unit, designation GR7. It was kneeling in the dust approximately 200 meters from Wren's landing site. A small unit, visibly assembled from mismatched components. One arm slightly darker than the other. Optical sensors that caught the thin light at 2 different temperatures, giving its face a split quality. It was looking up at Wren with one hand pressed flat against the ground. Cross-class contact was technically permitted under the Council's Operational Necessity Provision, Section 14.3. In practice, it almost never happened. Units communicated within their class. Atmospheric units spoke to other atmospheric units. Ground units, Wren assumed, spoke to other ground units, though it occurred to Ren that it had never actually confirmed this. It had never thought about ground units at all. Ren approached. The ground unit watched it come without moving, without adjusting posture, without any of the subtle signaling behaviors that higher-class units used to establish hierarchy in conversation. It simply looked. This sector is classified as inactive, Ren said. I'm investigating an atmospheric anomaly in this grid. Is there active remediation work being performed here? The ground unit regarded Ren for a moment. No, it said. Its voice was lower than Ren had expected, with a faint harmonic that suggested older vocal hardware. The soil is non-viable. I log readings. That's all. Your designation? GR7. Aster. Ren noted the name. Ground units weren't typically assigned names. Or perhaps they assigned them to themselves. Another thing Ren had never considered. I'm WRN-12, Ren said. Ren. The ground unit, Aster, nodded once. Then it looked down at the place where its hand met the ground, and Ren followed its gaze. There was a patch of soil there. Small, barely larger than a hand. But it was darker than the surrounding dust. Denser. Ren's sensors registered moisture content and a faint biochemical trace that matched nothing in its classification library. Ren looked at it for a long time. Then it looked at Aster. It said nothing about the patch. Thank you for the information, Ren said. I'll complete my survey. It flew back up through the gray. The whole visit took less than 20 minutes. At altitude, Ren opened its activity log and entered a single line. Routine atmospheric survey, Sector 14. No anomalies detected at ground level. No notable contact. Every word of it was a lie.